Captain Jack Glover wanted Desmond Doss out of his unit. He went to his battalion commander and requested a transfer. He tried to have Doss discharged as mentally unfit. He told Doss to his face, "You're not going to be by my damn side if you don't have a gun." And then, on a 400-foot cliff in Okinawa, Desmond Doss saved Captain Jack Glover's life. Years later, Glover said, "Finding out that he was one of the bravest persons alive, and then to have him end up saving my life, was the irony of the whole thing." This is the story of a soldier who refused to touch a weapon, who was called a coward, threatened with death by his own men, and nearly court-martialed, who became the first conscientious objector to receive the Medal of Honor during World War II. Desmond Thomas Doss was born February 7, 1919, in Lynchburg, Virginia. His mother raised him as a strict Seventh-day Adventist, and in the Doss home hung a framed illustration of the Ten Commandments. Next to the sixth commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," was a picture of Cain standing over the body of his brother Abel. Desmond Doss later described looking at that picture, "I came to the sixth commandment, 'Thou shalt not kill.' I wondered, how in the world could a brother do such a thing? It put a horror in my heart of just killin'." But it wasn't just a picture. His father, William, was a World War I veteran who never fully came home from the trenches. He struggled with PTSD. He drank. And one night, during a violent argument with Desmond's uncle, he pulled a pistol. Desmond's mother grabbed the gun. She handed it to young Desmond to hide. He watched his father get loaded into a police car. That was the last time Desmond Doss would willingly touch a firearm. December 7, 1941. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, Desmond Doss was working at the Newport News Naval Shipyard in Virginia. It was a defense job. He could have taken a deferment. He served anyway. In April 1942, Doss reported for duty. But here's the thing. Desmond Doss wanted to serve without carrying a weapon. He wasn't refusing to fight. He was refusing to kill. He later explained, "While I believe in the commandment, 'Thou shalt not kill,' and that bearing arms is a sin against God, my belief in freedom is as great as that of anyone else, and I had to help those boys who were fighting for it." The Army classified Desmond Doss as 1AO, Conscientious Objector available for non-combatant service. They made him a combat medic. Doss hated that term, conscientious objector. He preferred conscientious cooperator because he wasn't objecting to service, he was objecting to taking life. But when Desmond Doss arrived at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, the men of the 77th Infantry Division were about to make his life hell. Fort Jackson, South Carolina. The 77th Infantry Division, nicknamed the Statue of Liberty Division for its World War I service when most men came from New York City. Now, in 1942, the division drew from across the Northeast. Into their barracks walked a skinny, soft-spoken Virginian who didn't smoke, didn't drink, refused to eat meat, wouldn't train on Saturdays, and knelt beside his bunk every night to pray. The harassment started immediately. When Desmond Doss knelt to pray, the other men threw boots at him. They threw shoes. They called him Holy Jesus, Holy Joe, coward. And then came the threats. One soldier looked Desmond Doss in the eye and said, "Doss, as soon as we get into combat, I'll make sure you won't come back alive." Doss didn't doubt him. The enlisted men weren't the only problem. The officers wanted Desmond Doss gone too. Captain Jack Glover, his company commander, went to Battalion Commander Colonel Gerald Cooney and requested that Doss be transferred out of the 77th Infantry Division. When that didn't work, Glover tried something else. He initiated paperwork for a Section 8 discharge, claiming Desmond Doss was mentally unfit for military service. They held a hearing. Psychiatrists examined him. Doss told them he could not accept a discharge that implied he was mentally off because of his religion. He said he would be a very poor Christian if he did. The psychiatrists found nothing wrong with him. He wasn't mentally ill. He just had genuine religious convictions. The Army was stuck with Desmond Doss, but the officers weren't done. One officer tried to force a rifle into Doss's hands. When Desmond Doss refused to take it, court-martial proceedings were initiated for disobeying a direct order. The proceedings were eventually dropped. Another officer intervened, pointing to Doss's file and his protected 1AO status. But the message was clear. Nobody wanted Desmond Doss there. Nobody believed a soldier without a weapon was worth anything. In 1944, the 77th Infantry Division shipped out for the Pacific. July 1944, Guam. This was Desmond Doss's first taste of combat. The men who had threatened to kill him were about to find out what their Bible-carrying medic was made of. The 77th Infantry Division hit the beaches of Guam. Japanese machine guns opened fire. Artillery shells exploded. Men went down. And Desmond Doss ran into the chaos, again and again, dragging wounded men to cover, treating injuries while bullets cracked overhead, carrying men on his back through enemy fire. The men who had called him a coward watched Desmond Doss risk his life for them, over and over. For his actions on Guam, Desmond Doss was awarded the Bronze Star for valor. The men who had thrown boots at his head started to see him differently. After Guam came Leyte in the Philippines, November 1944 through February 1945. The fighting on Leyte was brutal. The Japanese defended every inch of jungle. The 77th Infantry Division pushed forward through mud, rain, and constant ambushes. During one engagement, Desmond Doss ran 100 yards through machine gun fire to reach 2 wounded soldiers from the 77th Infantry Division. One was already dead. Doss evacuated the other on a bamboo stretcher he improvised on the spot. For his continued heroism in the Philippines, he earned a second Bronze Star. By the time the 77th Infantry Division reached Okinawa in April 1945, something had changed. The men who had called Desmond Doss a coward, they didn't call him that anymore. The soldiers who had threatened to kill him, they wanted him nearby. As one account put it, any reservations his fellow soldiers had about him had turned to respect. But Okinawa would test all of them in ways none could imagine. April 29, 1945. The 307th Infantry Regiment of the 77th Infantry Division moved into position on Okinawa. Their objective was a 400-foot escarpment the troops called Hacksaw Ridge. The official name was Maeda Escarpment. The Japanese had heavily fortified this position. They'd carved tunnels through solid rock. They had machine gun nests positioned to create interlocking fields of fire, artillery positions hidden in caves, and thousands of soldiers waiting. To reach the top, American troops from the 77th Infantry Division had to climb cargo nets up a sheer cliff face. Getting up was hard enough. Staying alive up there? That was something else entirely. From a military logistics perspective, this was a nightmare. You can't reinforce troops on top. You can't evacuate wounded easily. You can't bring in heavy weapons. The Japanese strategy was simple. Let them climb, then destroy them. May 5th, 1945, a Saturday. Desmond Doss's Sabbath. Before the assault, Lieutenant Garanto gathered the men of the 77th Infantry Division. Desmond Doss had asked if they could pray first. The lieutenant told the company, "Fellows, come over here. Doss wants to pray for us." They prayed. Then they climbed. The 77th Infantry Division gained the summit. For a moment, it looked like they might hold it. And then hell opened up. A massive Japanese counterattack. Artillery, mortars, machine guns, grenades, fire coming from every direction. Approximately 75 American soldiers were hit. Blood everywhere. Screaming, dying. The rest fell back, scrambling down the cargo nets to escape the slaughter. The Americans retreated, but one man stayed behind. Desmond Doss refused to leave. All around him lay wounded soldiers from the 77th Infantry Division. Americans, his men, bleeding, screaming, dying. And Japanese forces closing in. He started dragging them to safety, one at a time. The escarpment rose 400 feet from the valley floor. At the top, a 35-foot vertical cliff separated the wounded from the medics waiting below, and Desmond Doss had no way to carry men down it. So he improvised. Doss later described it. A thought came to my mind. Lord, help me. Then I thought of a knot that I had never seen or heard of before in my life. He called it a double bowline. Desmond Doss tied the rope around a tree stump near the cliff edge, created a loop to support a man's body, and began lowering wounded soldiers one by one down the face of the escarpment, into the hands of medics waiting below. 12 hours. For 12 hours, Desmond Doss stayed on that ridge, running through gunfire to reach wounded men from the 77th Infantry Division, dragging them to the cliff edge, lowering them down, then going back for more. Each time he finished lowering a man to safety, Desmond Doss prayed the same prayer. Lord, please help me get one more. Then he went back into the fire. Japanese forces searched for survivors. Desmond Doss hid, waited, then went back to work. One more, then one more, then one more. This wasn't the first time Doss had risked everything on this ridge. 3 days earlier, on May 2nd, he'd exposed himself to heavy rifle and mortar fire to rescue a wounded man 200 yards forward of the lines. But May 5th was different. May 5th was when everything changed. Among the 75 men Desmond Doss saved that day was Captain Jack Glover, the same officer who had tried to have him discharged from the 77th Infantry Division. The same man who told him, "You're not going to be by my damn side if you don't have a gun." Desmond Doss brought him to the cliff edge, lowered him to safety, then went back for more. By the time Doss finally came down, he had rescued approximately 75 men. The Army's estimate was even higher, closer to 100. When asked about the number years later, Desmond Doss said, "I wanted 50, and they made it 75. I don't want to ever say I took care of 75. All I want to say is I was just thankful that the Lord was able to use me, and forget the number." But Hacksaw Ridge wasn't done with Desmond Doss. Over the following weeks, Desmond Doss continued treating wounded men from the 77th Infantry Division across Okinawa. On May 21st, 1945, his luck ran out. A Japanese grenade landed in his foxhole. Doss tried to kick it away. The explosion drove 17 pieces of shrapnel into his body, mostly his legs. Rather than call another medic and put someone else in danger, Desmond Doss treated his own wounds. He waited 5 hours for litter bearers to reach him. When they finally arrived and began carrying Desmond Doss to safety, they passed another wounded soldier, more critical than Doss. Doss crawled off his stretcher and told the bearers, "Take him first." While he waited for them to return, a Japanese sniper found him. The bullet shattered his left arm. Alone, with a compound fracture, Desmond Doss found a rifle stock. Not to shoot, to use as a splint. He bound the broken pieces of his arm together, and then he crawled 300 yards over rough terrain to the aid station. Stories like Desmond Doss's are why this channel exists. If you think more people should know about the Medal of Honor recipients who changed history, consider subscribing. October 12, 1945, the White House lawn. President Harry S. Truman stood before a group of Medal of Honor recipients for a mass presentation ceremony. When Desmond Doss stepped forward, something unusual happened. President Truman warmly shook his hand and held it while the Medal of Honor citation was read aloud. Then Truman said, "I'm proud of you. You really deserve this. I consider this a greater honor than being president." Desmond Doss became the first conscientious objector to receive the Medal of Honor during World War II. Only 2 others would ever receive the Medal of Honor as conscientious objectors, both posthumously during Vietnam. When asked about the honor, Desmond Doss said, "I feel that I received the Congressional Medal of Honor because I kept the golden rule that we read in Matthew 7:12. All things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them." Captain Jack Glover lived the rest of his life knowing that the man he tried to get rid of was the man who saved him. In the 2004 documentary, The Conscientious Objector, he finally said what the war had taught him. "Even though I said those things to him in regard to carrying a rifle, then he would never be by my damn side at all unless he had a rifle." But then, in the long run, finding out that he was one of the bravest persons alive, and then to have him end up saving my life, was the irony of the whole thing. Desmond Doss died on March 23, 2006. He was 87 years old. He never fired a weapon. He never took a life. He saved 75.